Hey, welcome to Conversations with my dear friend, Jeff Conway. My name is Susan. This is A Different Kind of Walk. Isaac Saul, the founder of Tangle, is a politics reporter who grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is where I live, one of the most politically divided counties in all of America. Isaac has lived, studied, traveled, and written all over the US and the world. He is also apparently very good at ultimate frisbee. So, Isaac Saul, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, in case our listeners do not know what Tangle is, founded in 2019, Tangle is an award-winning media organization that covers the biggest politics stories in the US by summarizing arguments from the right, left, and center, and then giving Tangle's take. They show them to you side by side so that you can decide. So, Isaac, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your background. You're from Bucks County. Are your parents still here? Do you have any siblings? What were some of the things that early on maybe led you down the path toward journalism?
Yeah. I grew up in Bucks County. I was born in Trenton, and when I was 5 or 6 years old, my family moved pretty much across the river to Yardley. And my parents at the time, my mom wasn't working. She was taking care of the kids, and my dad was kind of on like the front end of the computer.com boom. He was actually working at a computer company and selling computers back then, sort of before Windows and Apple came in and crushed everybody. I have two older brothers. I lived there, my whole life, pretty much from 5 until I went off to college. And my dad is still there in Morrisville. My parents actually split up, and my mom is in North Carolina now. But I think I like to say that I sort of Tangle kind of has two Genesis stories. And the first for me is the Bucks County story. It's that I just grew up in a really politically divided place. And as you know, probably from living there, where in Bucks are you?
I am in Bristol Borough, so
Oh,
very close
awesome.
to Morrisville, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's not a huge amount of racial diversity in Bucks County, but there's a ton of class diversity.
Mhm.
And in like our current political moment, class diversity is really the thing that determines political diversity more than anything else. It's income and type of work people do and education level. So that was true when I was younger. CNN was like coming to Pennsbury High School to interview parents and stuff and doing the diner stories in Yardley and things like that to try and see, what way the presidential election was going to go. So I think I just grew up really comfortable around people of different political persuasions. And I grew up in a very political household. Both my parents are like dyed in the wool Democrats. My dad was reading me the Washington Post and the New York Times out loud every morning at the kitchen table. His dad was really politically involved, lawyer and activist in Washington, D.C. And so, politics definitely permeated the household. And I think like a lot of kids, when I grew up and sort of, left to go to college and kind of became an adult, I realized that maybe, all my political and worldviews weren't totally aligned with my parents, and I got to experience other people's views and get, kind of different impressions put onto me and pushed in different directions. And I was really fortunate. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, which is a great school, also in a really interesting political place. I mean, Western Pennsylvania is much like Bucks, really, really diverse politically, even though it was a city university. Pittsburgh is not like Philadelphia or New York. It's not really a Northeast city. It's not some liberal cosmopolitan area. It's very working class, very kind of Midwest. And I actually went to Pitt to be an athletic trainer. And my first semester at Pitt, which is famous for having a really, really good pre-med program and medical school, you know, I guess I don't know what the exact word is for it, but the hospitals in Pittsburgh, like the hospital systems are incredible, and a lot of people go there to become doctors and work in that system. So I was in like bio and anatomy classes as an athletic training major with a bunch of kids who are way smarter than me trying to become doctors, and I pretty much got crushed and weeded out early on. And at the same time, I was taking some classes that I just were passion classes, like nonfiction writing and things like that. And I was getting A's in all of those and like C's and D's and F's in my bio and anatomy classes. And I kind of had like a come to Jesus moment, realizing A, maybe I wasn't cut out for it, and B, that I didn't really want to be an athletic trainer. I thought a lot about what the future would be like. I shadowed some people and, it wasn't that interesting of a job for me once I saw it up close and in person. And so I applied for a job at the school newspaper and I worked for the school newspaper as a sports editor. And that kind of launched my journalism career. Um, and then the second Genesis story was just I got a job in the mainstream media, quote unquote. My first job ever was at the Huffington Post, and I just saw how the sausage was made, and it was, you know, I like telling people I didn't work at the Huffington Post because I was like a bleeding heart lib. It was because I applied for 40 jobs, and they were the only place that gave me a job. Um, but they are obviously well known for being a left-leaning news outlet, which is fine. But it was interesting to work there and realize that, they had no interest in reaching half the friends and family I had back home. They were just interested in reaching a very specific audience. And I didn't like that very much. And there was something about it that felt a little icky to me. And I think that was sort of the seed that was planted that kind of led to Tangle, which, for me, my goal is to build a big tent media organization, a place where people of all political backgrounds can come and feel like they're seen and heard and being spoken to, and have a shared set of facts and arguments to discuss. So yeah, it's been kind of a long and winding journey to get to where I'm at, but I'm 6 years in and certainly enjoying the ride right now.
It's
Mm.
incredible what you are doing. When I think of it, it's like starting CNN on your own with some other people or NBC or something like that. It really is incredible what you're doing. And I thank you for putting the energy into that, which I'm sure is challenging at times with all that you have to do. But I sure appreciate a source that gives me views from all sides, I guess I would say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, it is challenging. Like, honestly, being in the arena is exhausting sometimes, and it's emotionally taxing. It's hard on my family. It's hard on me to have your opinions dissected and criticized, and it's hard to just, wake up in the morning and mainline all the horrors of the world. I mean, there's a lot of bad news out there. But the North Star for us is kind of the thing that keeps me getting out of bed. I mean, I feel like we're building something that's a unique offering in the space, and that's actually genuinely good for people. Like, we know from our readers and our audience that when they engage with our content, it makes them better thinkers. It makes them more empathetic about people they disagree with. It just turns down the temperature a little bit. And I think all those things are really needed right now in this political moment for our country.
So, in a few of the reader response, or however you would call that, you've gotten beat up a bit. You did say that that was tough on you and the family. How are you dealing with that negative coming in when you're trying to display all sides of an issue?
Yeah, I mean, well, two things. One, there's a ton of social research on this and like social science, which is actually pretty interesting, which is basically, or psychology research, I guess we should say, which is people always focus and put an overemphasis on negative feedback. I could get 100 emails telling me how, our work's saving the world and how incredible we are, whatever. And there's one really biting critical email. And that's the one I'm going to be thinking
That's the
about
one
the
you
rest of the day, despite the fact that 99% of them were really positive. So I try and gut check myself in that way a lot, which is just, to go look at our surveys and read the emails that come in from people who are complimenting us up and down, talking about how important our work is, and sort of really hold on to and hear those perspectives. So when the criticism comes in, it doesn't feel like the world is ending. And then the other kind of, I guess the second part is something I picked up from Emily Oster, who's she's a really famous kind of parent influencer. She has her own website called parentdata.org, and she writes a lot about, sort of debunking myths for parents. And she's got this really culty following. I just had my first kid, and I used her for a ton of research to try and answer questions about, making all the big, scary parenting decisions. And I actually interviewed her on my show about, like just sort of the politics of parenting today. And she said something to me that I really love, which she said criticism is sort of like the mail, and you get to decide what you bring in your house and what you just throw out because it's junk mail. And it's just like you are the one who ultimately chooses what you take inside and what you bring home with you. And like you should make smart decisions about that up front. And so I try and do that now. I've been thinking a lot about that and more about that. It's just like there are some emails you get that you could spend all day ruminating on or trying to reply to. But if you really stop and think about the value of them or how worth the time it is, you realize like this isn't mail I should be bringing inside the house. It's just junk mail. And this person's not interested in like a real conversation or dialogue. They're just blowing off steam. So you throw it out. And I'm trying to do that more and like pick my spots on where to really dive in, I think.
You're preaching to yourself right now. So the next time a hard one comes in, remember what you just said there.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try. I won't always be successful, but I'll definitely try.
No, yeah, try your best.
Yeah, are there I've seen you write things about going to get a massage. Are there other things like that that you and your team have to kind of take part in just to decompress and continue on doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I try and give people really lenient vacation policies. We have like some rules actually that, twice a year people have to take a 4-day weekend, like mandatory. We have unlimited PTO. We take all the major federal holidays off. People get off for their birthdays.
Mhm.
I have really strict rules that I enforce, like well, before my child was born, I had really strict rules I enforced where at like 6 p.m. I would close my computer and I'm offline for the night and like I'm unreachable. Now I'm doing a little bit less work during the day to manage childcare stuff and daycare and all that. So I do come online a little bit more in the evenings. But like Shabbat for me is a total blackout zone, Friday night to Saturday night, where it's like call me if there's an emergency and I might answer, but like I'm also pretty much unreachable. So, I try and encourage people to do things like that and take those mental health breaks and get outside during the day and talk to people. I also just think if you're going to do good journalism or you're going to write things that are powerful or important, or you're going to have like a authentic grounded in reality perspectives. You can't just be on your computer reading the news all day. You actually have to go out in the world and talk to real people and experience real things and meet real people. And so, to the degree that I can encourage my team to do that, I try to. I mean, it's Twitter maybe is more real life than it used to be, but it's still not real life. I mean, I think like it's mostly a place where the loudest, most extreme voices get elevated, and you talk to real people in real life, and it skews your perspective, I think, oftentimes in a more positive way, which is really important.
Yeah, I've actually helped with our local election every year for the past few years because it's just something that my parents always did and it was just meaningful to me. And I've found, again, the past few years that like going and working the polls that day, I encounter so many different people who are politically all over the place, and I have a wonderful time. And I have like super positive interactions with all of them. And so yeah, it's been interesting to do just what you said, to actually interact with real people because it's not nearly people seem to feel really free to say absolutely horrible things when they're hiding behind a computer. And they don't do that as much face to face.
Look at
So
his face right now. He knows exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's performative too. I mean, that's an element of it that I've noticed. I mean, even the way that people comment on our articles when they know other people are going to read the comments is different than how they communicate with me privately if they write to me via email. I mean, always. And then the way people interact in person is even a different level than when they communicate via email. I notice that trend pretty consistently. And I've also, I mean, being somebody who's like, in the media space, our brand is becoming more well known and I'm becoming more popular. I'm starting to operate in some different circles that I wasn't really in before. And so I've now had the experience of meeting really big media personalities in person who I've been following for years. And oftentimes I meet people who I see are like consistently jerks online all the time. And then I meet them in real life and they're like totally sweet and awesome and thoughtful. And I'm like, why are you like this online when this is like who you actually are? Like it's so, there's something about the dynamic that makes them want to be much more provocative and combative. And then I meet them in real life. I'm like, wow, you're actually an awesome person, and you should bring this personality to the internet because who you are on Twitter sucks. But it's a weird, complicated thing.
So when you're talking about meeting other well-known folks out there, they have budgets that they can do all kinds of things. Do you get out? Are you able to get out and get into these situations that you're writing about, or do you depend a lot on phone calls and that kind of
Yeah,
communication?
I mean, one of the advantages that we have of being a fully remote company, I mean, I'm here in our Philadelphia office and there are three of us here. We're 12-person company. So nine of the 12 people are kind of spread out across the country. So we actually span a huge geographical range. I mean, we have Texas, California, Oregon, Colorado, Vermont, New York, North Carolina, Tennessee. I mean, we're really all over. So we can kind of drop in when we need to on some different events that happen across the country because of that versatility, which is nice. The challenge that we run into oftentimes is like getting press passes for events. Like in 2024, for instance, we got credentialed for the Democratic National Convention, but not for the RNC,
Mm.
which we thought was really odd. I mean, we were kind of expecting the opposite actually, because the DNC was really focused on inviting in a bunch of progressive and liberal influencers to cover the event. They actually gave like really, really preferential treatment to left-leaning influencers and bloggers and stuff over traditional media. And we thought because of the kind of centrist tone that we take on some issues or the fact that we sort of, invite conservatives into our big tent that they wouldn't credential us, but they did, and we actually got a lot of access. And the RNC just rejected us without explanation. So we run into stuff like that, just being like a smaller, lesser known outlet. But in terms of like events like that, the inauguration, yeah, we try and go to that stuff. I mean, this year it was really helpful because Philly was kind of the center of the political universe. Because Pennsylvania was such a must win. I mean, Trump and Biden were here almost every other week. It was like a joke in the city that you couldn't drive anywhere without getting stuck in a motorcade
Uh,
blockage. It was so frustrating. I mean, it happened to me three times in the span of 6 months where I was like on the highway or going somewhere, even in Center City, and then all of a sudden everything shut down for 10 minutes and you just sit there in your car while the motorcade goes past. So both of them were really all over, and that made it a little bit easier. But it's also a lot of phone calls and emails and, prodding people that way too.
okay.
So, just a second ago, you mentioned Shabbat, and I have a question about that because in a recent article about the backlash of technology, you mentioned that you host Shabbat dinners at your house for both Jews and non-Jews alike, and then everybody's phones go away for those dinners, as you said. So my question was just, are you Jewish by birth, or is that something that you became interested in later? And I was wondering if you could describe those dinners, partly because I want to go, but mostly, I'm mostly just curious because I'm curious how you make them hospitable for people who don't share your faith.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Jewish. My mom is Jewish. My dad was actually raised in like a Quaker family.
Mhm.
I have really interesting kind of Quaker roots that actually come back here to Philadelphia. I don't know whether it's family lore or not, but I've always been told that we are the descendants of Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island, who is
Oh.
pretty much responsible for the separation of church and state in the United States. But yeah, my dad converted when he married my mom, and so I was raised in just a Jewish household, pretty reformed Judaism, but was bar mitzvah and all that. And then when I was like 15, I declared I was an atheist and whatever, was leaving the religion. And then I went to college, and I sort of got roped back in by a college campus rabbi who invited me to Shabbat dinner, which when I was 18 was like, oh my God, free food and booze every Friday night at 7 o'clock when I'm like a broke college student. This is awesome. Um, and it worked. I mean, I started going, it became part of my weekly routine. And I sort of was like, oh, this is like my space. These are my people. So many of the songs and the prayers and all this stuff are things I remember from when I was like, 3 years old at JCC. And then, I start having an interest in the faith and having conversations and debates and whatever. And yeah, he really brought me back. And then I went to Israel on birthright. And then after college, I moved to Israel and I lived in Jerusalem at a yeshiva actually for 6 months. So I was in like an all boys religious school, which a lot of American Jews do not do. That was like a pretty extreme thing. And so I had a pretty intense period of kind of learning. And then I came home for that job at Huffington Post. And I've sort of been like in and out, I would say, in terms of my practicing and just like my dedication to certain things and how strong my convictions were. I think like most people, things happen in your life where you feel really connected and grounded, and then other things happen that sort of makes you feel like I want to run away from this. So I go through those trials and tribulations, but yeah, the Shabbat has been one thing that I've like really since that time. It's been 12 or 13 years now since I was living in Israel. 12 years, I guess, maybe 11 or 12 years, I guess. And since that time, I've been really consistent about Shabbat, just observing in some way. Whether it's just like the technological blackout or it's like full-fledged dinner and services and going back to services on Saturday. And there's like varying degrees you can do, but the Shabbat dinners are really truly one of my favorite things to do. And mostly they consist of bringing people around a table, having like some traditional elements like challah that my wife makes, or my grandmother's brisket, or some sort of old school, Jewish food on the table. And then the prayers over the bread and the wine and the candles, the lighting of the candles, and sort of explaining typically for like a group of friends that is, like you said, kind of mixed faith, like what's happening, why we're doing it, what the tradition is here, why I connect with this. Um, and then eating food for like an hour. And then in the Jewish faith, there's something called like a Devar Torah, which is basically like a lesson. There's, every week we have a Torah portion that we study. So I will spend a few days before Shabbat reading the Torah portion that is correlates to that week and just kind of meditating on it and thinking about it. And then I basically interrupt dinner like halfway through and kind of give like a sermon, which is really just like an explanation of what the Torah portion is that week, and what I kind of take away from it, like what my personal learning is. And I try and make it something that is applicable to people regardless of whether they're like believers or not, which I think is like an inviting way to do it and often isn't hard. I mean, this is like the most popular book in the history of the world for a reason. There's a lot of lessons that apply to a lot of different parts of life. So, yeah, and then kind of, finish up, have dessert, whatever, and invite people to sort of sit back and relax and hang out for however long they want. Shabbat to me, one of the coolest things in my view about Shabbat is that like, I mean, you're literally being commanded to rest. It's like God didn't create. So like if the big guy didn't, or gal didn't. You don't have to, certainly. So I love that part of it is like this is really an excuse to just like put your phone away, take your shoes off, get comfortable, settle in, eat some food. And literally, I tell people, if you want to leave the table and go outside for a quiet break, or you want to lay down on the couch, or whatever you want to do, like you are literally being commanded to actually rest and connect here. And you should feel free to do that. And a lot of people take that invitation and they love it. So it's like a really powerful way to connect with friends and family for me, and also a grounding way to end the week that I really like.
So hopefully you'll know how I'm asking this question. You're a rabbi. You're so articulate with what you're talking about for the Sabbath. So how could you possibly be open to different views politically and report on them?
um, there's an old saying that the Jewish sages say that God dances in heaven when you defeat him in argument. I think Jews have always been invited to debate. When I was in yeshiva in Israel, I was invited to question everything. I was, in terms of the kind of religiosity that people were holding who were in that yeshiva, I would say I was near the bottom. I remember really vividly. I got there. It was called what's called like a Bolshevi yeshiva, which is a yeshiva made for kids who are raised reformed or secular, and they're trying to convert them to be more
Uh,
Orthodox Jews. So you're studying and you're living with a bunch of Orthodox Jews, but there's classes of incoming students that come from secular backgrounds. And so I arrived on day one with, a class of 8 kids or something like that. And one of the 8 maybe was wearing a yarmulke when we got there and felt like he was like presenting Jewish. And on like day 3, 7 of the 8, except for me, were. And I wasn't, because as I articulated to one of the rabbis, like I still don't really totally understand why the yarmulke is important or what it necessitates, what it's communicating. I'm just like not convinced that it's that important. And that got me so much attention from the other teacher. Like it was like they wanted to compel me. Like they wanted me to move, but they also loved the fact that I wasn't just like conforming to the thing everybody else was doing because everybody else was doing it. And I think that really is like a Jewish spirit, honestly. I think,
yeah,
culturally, we love to argue. And I think like in the faith practice, studying Talmud is like, it is literally inviting 1v1 debate over the way sentences are structured and what the meaning is. So I really, yeah, I think it applies in a really fun and enlightening way in terms of some of the work that I do on the day-to-day basis.
right. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. We're in Jerusalem. What part of Jerusalem? I've been just 7 or 8 times, but
Yeah, I was in East Jerusalem, really not far from the Western Wall, but basically like right on the border of some of the Muslim neighborhoods that kind of run up against it, which was super fascinating. I mean, that was a really informative part of I was playing pickup basketball with like Arabs and Jews and tourists and, people from kind of all over were cycle through that neighborhood, which made it really, yeah, a lot of like thought provoking and interesting experiences in that
I
environment.
used to love walking around the old city at night and just the different aromas and the singing that came out of that house. And it was beautiful. I tell people Jerusalem smells like God, and they look at me funny.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's just beautiful there.
I find that interesting. You talk about the Jewish spirit as one of questions and questioning and debate. My assumption, I would actually, you can correct me. My assumption is that even those debates where you're like parsing out different words and verses and things like that, do not devolve, or maybe the spirit of those debates aren't ones, maybe, of huge confrontation and conflict and almost hatred. My guess is that it's more almost in a spirit of joy and fun, but you're still trying to get down to the bottom of things because it matters. But is that true? Is the spirit more like that than one that's really negative?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think especially in the context of like a yeshiva and, learning Talmud or, that I think there's like a sparring that happens kind of with a smile on your face, and it's like almost a battle of wits more than anything. Um, I don't want to overgeneralize. Well, first of all, I don't speak for all Jews, and certainly not more Orthodox or religious Jews who are well better learned and more practiced than I am. But I mean, there's real interfaith conflict, especially right now with everything that's happening in Israel. I mean, there are real fundamental disagreements in how certain sects of American Jews see religion and faith and the history of Judaism and culture and what Jews stand for and what they should be versus how more religious Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem might. So that kind of tension and friction, I think, is real. But yeah, I mean, in that context, in the learning context, I would say, at least in my experience, I never saw it devolve into sort of shouting matches. It was always like a good faith discussion or debate and a push and pull where, the point isn't to win or embarrass your opponents, to kind of compel them to your argument. It's to persuade. And I think that's like a really different approach than winning. They're often not the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. Like my kids are 12 and 10, and as we go through teaching them different things, like I would love to raise them with that idea of like, no, question all of it, question everything. Like come to this with curiosity and ask questions because that's at least you're engaging, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really important. I mean, for me, I think any space, not just religious, but political or otherwise, where you aren't allowed to poke or prod or ask questions. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that makes the hair go up on the back of my neck. I mean, to me, it's sort of like red flag city. And I know from friends who were raised in really, like fundamentalist Christian faiths. When I talk about my experience in really religious Orthodox Jewish settings, they're jealous of that. I mean, I think that is something that is culturally a little bit different, um, at least in the way like the modern faiths are practiced. And it always catches up to you. I mean, you can't kill everybody's doubts or questions by ignoring them or bulldozing them. I mean, you have to address them. And that again, that's true not just in religion, but pretty much all things, I think.
Yeah, in that regard, I'd love to read this small quote from the website because it fits really well with what you're talking about. It says, the issue, the one Tangle is trying to solve, is that very few singular news outlets are actually providing any balance. They are all just competing with each other to win the debate for one side or the other. So, yeah, so that seems to be your goal is to be that big tent organization where you can come no matter where your views are and you can rub shoulders with people who might not agree with everything that you believe, but you're going to learn something, and hopefully your ideas will be represented too. So it's everybody.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we like to say that like if you read our newsletter, listen to our podcast, and you aren't pissed off at least once, and you don't see your views represented somewhere at least once, then we're probably not doing our job. Like we should articulate 90% of people's arguments in some fashion somewhere. And we should also be sharing a diverse enough range of views that you read something or hear something that you really don't like. And that's the goal for us, genuinely.
no, I do find it really helpful. Just as you say, it's like we're going to lay out this is what happened, this is what the right is saying about it, this is what the left is saying about it, this is what the center is saying about it. And then one of your writers comes in and gives their take. I have to admit that you've kind of pulled me back into the world of actually reading the news, because there are times for sure that I'm so overwhelmed by the divisiveness of most media that I just give up on it and stick my fingers in my ears and go la 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 for a while. So, my last question is, are there particular things as you do this job that give you hope? Maybe things that give you hope that we're headed in a better direction?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, I think this is self-interested, but the success of my business, I think, actually gives me hope. I mean, when I started Tangle, I was not confident that this would work. I mean, if anything, I was skeptical. I didn't believe that the format would be inviting in the way that, just feeding people the views they want to hear is inviting, and we would have really big challenges in growing our audience and appealing to a lot of Americans. Um, in some ways, I think that's borne out. Like we have people all the time who subscribe to the newsletter and then they read the first one and they say, I can't believe you said XYZ. I'm canceling my subscription. And we're like, what did you think you were going to get here? And so that's frustrating sometimes. At the same time, we have 450,000 people on our mailing list who are trying to better understand the world every day, and they're willing to get out of their comfort zone. They're willing to engage. They're willing to hear different arguments. And so that part gives me hope. Um, I'll say too, I think like people are way more willing to change their minds than we think. I think like as a country, we're a lot more open-minded than we think or than we maybe give ourselves credit for. I mean, first of all, despite some of the things that's happening with this administration and that happened in the last, we do still have a pretty robust sort of free speech culture. I think like most Americans have a fundamental view that people should be allowed to say things that they believe, whether they're disagreeable or not, in most contexts. That doesn't mean that like you can never be held accountable for your words or speech or whatever, but I think generally speaking, that view is still really widely held among Americans, and that's a really good thing. And I also think Americans change their minds about stuff all the time. I mean, we see the political wave kind of change regularly. We see certain movements become really popular and then become unpopular very quickly. The kinds of polling spikes and falls and drops that we see, like all of that is reflecting real public opinion that moves because people are actually willing to change their minds. And I think we kind of take that for granted. My experience in my work has been that people who disagree with views that I share or opinions that I have are way, way, way more persuadable when I hear them out, ask questions about their viewpoint, make sure I understand what their actual position is, and then try and better communicate the thing that I said that they objected to. And I've changed people's perspectives on all sorts of ideas that they've held with my writing. And I've also changed my mind because people have written in to me and given me really compelling arguments that moved me. So, yeah, I just think like those two things give me a lot of hope about the future. And, everybody always worries about the next generation and like TikTok and AI and, oh, the kids are all crazy and they're on their phones, whatever. I have three employees under the age of 24 here at Tangle, and they're incredible. They're smart, thoughtful, super hardworking. That we joke that we have like this little Gen Z pack that runs around. We always go to them with, is this a real Gen Z trend? But like they really know their stuff, and they're part of that generation. And when they were applying for this job, they were applying for it with a bunch of other super qualified, smart, interesting kids because they're kids to me now, like that I would have hired. So I think like all of that is really hopeful too in an era where like we are really cynical about the future and the state of things.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Jeff, is there anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I'm just realizing you're my son's group age and um, proud of you. So I can say this in a way. that I hope you will receive as a blessing, but always remember how dearly loved you are by God in what you're serving, who you are. And so when that stuff gets thrown at you, just lean into that person that's loved by God.
Thank
So
you. I appreciate the blessing very much.
really, really thrilled for you.
Thank you guys for having me. I
All
appreciate it.
right. Take
Yeah, you have a
care.
great day. Nice to meet you, Isaac.
All right. Nice to meet you guys too. Thanks so much.
See you. Bye bye.
Thanks for joining us for A Different Kind of Walk. To find out more about Tangle, go to readtangle.com. That's readtangle.com. Until next time, live well.